Hey, it's Michael here. I'm going to work today on practice test 7, writing questions that a user on Reddit, looks like it's firm faithless49, put up a general question. It wasn't a request to me, but I thought maybe I can respond with a quick video, not just to show the correct answer, because that's easy to do on the form. You can just write out the correct answer, but to go through the process of eliminating and identifying the correct answer and why. Because a lot of kids kind of get these questions right, but their gut tells them what it is because they have good linguistic ability, but they don't know the rules. So I want to go over the actual rules and apply them into these questions. So, by the way, my wife says we look alike. He's not on vacation, so he's shaved. I also have a Milou mug. If you don't know, this is Tintin. So here we go to the tablet. Okay, here we are, practice test 7. The student was asking questions about the writing section, so we'll go down to the writing section. Should be around page 21, I think, 22. Let's see what we got here. Oh, there we are. I guessed right. One thing to remind students always is pay attention to titles. The questions the student asked about 13, 14, 25, 27 are not in the first passage, but I want to remind you that always look upon the title as a thesis statement. It's as close to a thesis statement as we're going to get. It tells us what the passage is about. That'll help answer at least one question on each of these passages. Usually it's one of those conclusion ones. So, they change the language of the conclusion and they want to focus on something that's outside of the topic, which is, might be something what we call tangential to, I don't know how to say that word. It's a tangent, okay, to the topic, but it's a small minor point, or they're trying to lead you into a connection that's not true. If we stick to the title, that'll really help us. So I just want to take the opportunity to give you that advice here. So we go down to the next passage here is professional development, a shared responsibility. So this is all about, this really helps us out a lot. So pay attention to that, please. Now, students' first question is number 13. So I see 13 now. When I look at these things, I want to sort of translate, at least in my mind, the no change over to here because I don't want to be prejudiced by it. So I'm looking at this as a dash here. Now I always want to, on the reading section, I don't want to look at the possible answers first because they're going to fool me. So I want to look at the question, get information from it, then go find the evidence for it in the text. But on the writing section, I do want to look at the possible answers first to get a sense for them before I even bother reading. So I got a dash here, I got no punctuation, I have a comma here, and I have a semicolon here. Okay, now let's say I'm walking along, blah, 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 blah. It's a hot day and I come along a big old tree. Okay. It's a nice apple tree. It's got an apple hanging right there. But I look up and I see a really big, juicy one way up here. Okay. So I try to reach up for it. I just can't reach up for it. I go, oh, no, I can't climb all the way to get this big, juicy apple right here. Right. That's what we call the low hanging fruit. Okay. It's the easy one. So in my eliminations, get rid of the easy ones. And for me, the easy one is usually a dash or a semicolon. So if it's a dash, right, it does two things. So I'm going to have two rules to eliminate the dash, rule 1 and rule 2. Rule 1 is a dash acts like a colon, right? So if it acts like a colon, it must have an independent clause before it, and it can have anything afterwards, or it's acting like a parentheses. If it's acting like a parentheses, it must have open parentheses, close parentheses, right? Now, remember, there's another way to do parentheses, which is with commas here as well. So this creates parenthetical information, and all that. What that does is that gives us, let's say we have a subject and a verb. This is what they usually do. It gives us additional information about the subject, or it could be subject, verb, parentheses, before the object, or somewhere along the way. The parentheses is designed to give us information. It could come between dashes. It could come between parentheses. It could come between commas. They all do the same thing. Generally speaking, it's going to be a little modifying phrase. Sometimes it'll be giving you fuller information. You could have anything within the parentheses. But what the writer's trying to do is to give you stuff like, say, okay, so Mr. Smith, comma, my neighbor, that says my neighbor, is nice, okay? So my neighbor is parenthetical here. So I have subject, verb, right? And then my subject complement, nice, which is an adjective. So what this is doing is called it. This is, in this case, it's an apositive phrase, which is it's a set of nouns, my pronoun, neighbor, or it could be things that act as a noun that just defines Mr. Smith. So it's telling me. So I go subject, comma, information, comma, verb here. And again, this could be after the verb, it could be anywhere. It could be before the subject. My neighbor, Mr. Smith. And they oftentimes mess around with this. What are we talking about? Which is the subject and verb. So let's just think that through here on our fields here. So when I go to the sentence itself, starts here, to perform their job successfully. That's just an introductory phrase, so just get rid of it, okay? So I'm going to start the sentence here. Workers in many, what is my subject and what is my verb? Okay, look for the verb first, because the verb, that's actually a V. I don't know what kind of V that was. Here's my verb, okay? So always look for the verb, because this helps us identify clauses and phrases and dependent and independent clauses. Remember, a clause has a subject plus a verb, and it's part of a larger sentence, right? An independent clause could be a sentence by itself, and then a dependent clause could not be a sentence by itself. So just remember what a clause is. If it doesn't have a subject and a verb, it's what we call a phrase. And there are all kinds of different phrases. But in any case, always identify that verb. When I go through the sentence from blah, 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 continue, acquire, okay? So here's the where my excuse me, here's where my verb comes along. So must, adverb, acquire, must acquire, okay? So workers must acquire. So that's my subject here, and here's my verb. Now, remember I said a subject and a verb cannot be interrupted by by anything except, well, it can be, excuse me, a subject and verb can be interrupted by 2 commas, 2 dashes, or parentheses, but it cannot be interrupted by 1 or a dash or just 1 comma, because the subject and verbs have to be attached to each other, and I'm not interrupting them with the open and close parenthetical phrase or whatever's in the parenthetical element here. So I know that subject and verb can't have just 1 break. Oh, well, look here. There's another break here. There's a comma, okay? So it gives me 2 breaks, but I can't do parentheses and then dash, right? So I have to do parentheses, parentheses, and you dash, dash, and you do comma, comma. So I know that this is, 1, not acting like a parenthetical element, because if it is, it would have to have another dash in there, and there's no other dash, all right? I don't see another dash, so it's not that. Now, is it acting like a colon? A colon, I said, requires an independent clause here, right? And so do we have an independent? Workers in many fields. Okay, I don't have a clause, because a clause is a subject and a verb. It contains one, and this just gives me workers and then a prepositional phrase in many fields. So I do not have an independent clause here, so that would be wrong. Now I can do that same rule here to my semicolon, which is another one of the low-hanging apples, my low-hanging fruit, because an independent semicolon must have an independent clause on both sides, because that's what it does. It combines independent clauses. It can also do lists in a very particular way. I'm not going to get into that, but for the most part for this test, it's going to combine independent clauses, and I don't have an independent clause, so I get rid of A and D. Now notice what I've done here. This is, you can do this in your head super fast. I'm trying to break it down into little steps for you, but I'm applying the rules. I'm looking at what's the rule for a dash, what's the rule for a semicolon. At this point, I've already identified the correct answer, because I know that there's that comma there, and I can't do subject comma verb, so I have to have subject comma blah 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 comma verb, and that's what's going on here. I need a comma right here to match and create my parenthetical phrase. So I got subject verb interrupted by this what we call from social strengths to manufacturing. It's actually a prepositional phrase, but it's acting as what we call an apositive, which is to give information to describe workers. Okay, notice how we have this preposition workers in many fields, from social services to manufacturing. This is a series of prepositional phrases, all of which add information. It's not the core of the sentence, which is workers must continually acquire. Okay, and then again, we get the reason why B is wrong, because we need an additional comma here to match it up. So I go with C. All right, let's move on to 14. Let's make some space here. That's a really bad picture, isn't it? It's a really awful picture. Okay, but you get the point, the low-hanging fruit. So let's go for the low-hanging fruit. Now, this one is transition. So the first thing I do is I'm going to move accordingly over here, because I don't want to be prejudiced by reading it into a possible wrong answer into my reading of these 2 sentences. Now, in these transition words, which are actually adverbs, and there are a couple things that I'd like you to do. Think about what they do. They take the following sentence is doing something to the first sentence. It's either supporting it, adding information to, Carrying on an next logical step, it's doing something and it's transitioning from sentence one into sentence two. But I want to know what sentence two is doing to sentence one. And I want to know, first off, is it making a positive transition or a negative transition or a neutral transition, just adding information or something? So if it's positive, then it would need, I look at the accordingly. Accordingly is a positive transition, isn't it? So it means similarly, or not similarly, but accordingly means, well, therefore. It's kind of like drawing a conclusion. You're saying because of this, then that, accordingly. Nevertheless, get to know this one if you don't know it. Nevertheless means, yeah, but. Okay, that's what nevertheless means. So I could say, I went to the movies. Nevertheless, it wasn't all that enjoyable. So yeah, I went to the movies, but it wasn't enjoyable. Now, regardless is another one that says, regardless just says, well, anyway. Okay, anyway, so these are both negative transitions. Okay, similarly is giving me additional comparative information. So that would be repeating it in a different way. So giving an example or bringing in something that's related to it. So that's a positive transition. These two are negative. So I want to look at this and I want to say, and again, by the way, make sure you've got an easy translation in your head so you know exactly what these transitions are doing. I've got on my, if you follow my profile, you can go to my wiki. I've got an entry on there that gives translations for these transition words. Okay, so now I go back and read this. This practice of continuing education. Now notice something here. I can learn from, if I were reading this when I'm 14, and let's say I got 13 wrong, I look here and go, oh, wait a minute. So I know this is correct because it's not underlined, right? This gives me parenthetical use of those commas. So I say, oh, wait, what about that other comma? Always pay attention to commas because this will help me correct if I got 13 wrong. Oh, I see what 13 was doing. It was using those commas parenthetically. So I needed to have two. And this is also known as professional development. This is simply modifying continued education. All right, so at this practice, it's actually modifying practice, subject, verb, benefits. Okay, anyway, that helps us kind of really identify what's going on in these sentences. But it also helps us correct ourselves because I'm using the correct language to fix maybe a wrong response on another question. Anyway, continuing education benefits not only employees, but also their employers. Okay, so I got a contrast, right? Not only employees, but also their employers. Meaningful professional development is a shared responsibility. Okay, that does not seem to be, by shared, it's saying it helps employees and employers. So I'm either adding information to, I'm not giving another example, but it's certainly a positive transition. So I want to get rid of the negative ones because it's not negating that. This says that it benefits not only employees, but their employers, and it is a shared responsibility. So I could say similarly is not giving me additional information there. It's actually telling me, well, therefore, it's a shared responsibility. So we see it's a positive transition, and we go with our correct answer, A. It's not giving us another example. It's drawing a conclusion from the prior one. So sentence 2 is drawing a conclusion from sentence 1 in a positive way. All right, that was 14. Now the student also wants to do number 25 and 27. Let's go down there. That's going to be a different passage. So this passage is, by the way, just to make this point about titles, notice how a shared responsibility, see that whole thing helps us, the writer's not going to do a negative transition on this, a shared responsibility, because it's in the title. So it's obviously something the writer wants to emphasize by choosing that title, or the editors by choosing that title. So that would be a positive thing. That's a place where these titles can be helpful to get the writer's point. All right, so we got numbers 25 and 27. Evolution of slow food. Okay, 25. All right, so this is, let's see what we got going on here. Number 25 is one of these, yes, add the information. Okay, for here, we're sticking to the emphasis, right? So this is the evolution of slow food. So it's telling us starting in 1986, fast food came along, and then to counter the rise of fast food. So we need some context to answer these types of questions. So let's see where this thing is going. And now note how this is going to go. Is this a concluding sentence or not? So the couple things I might do when I just determine yes, no. I need to take in mind that it's asking me to add a concluding sentence to the first paragraph, which introduces the whole idea of the evolution of slow food. So, but what I like to do is ignore the yes, no, and then look at the explanations and see if I can eliminate them. So the group's philosophers connected the tail, the hare, and the tortoise, in which the tortoise wins the race. Does that explain the primary belief that led to this? That's obviously not what happened. So that didn't lead to the development of slow food, so that would be wrong, okay? It reinforces a claim that the writer makes early in the paragraph. Okay, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I don't see anything about the slow and steady wins the race, right? Maybe. So let's say I can't eliminate that. Then I go, no, because it blurs the paragraph's focus by introducing not clearly explained. It probably does that, right? And no, it distracts from the paragraph's emphasis on slow movements, origins, and beliefs. Now, what at this point? Okay, maybe I can or can't eliminate that. It distracts from the paragraph's emphasis on the slow movements, origins, and beliefs. I'm not so sure it gets into their beliefs, so that it might be wrong simply because it's not about beliefs. So I want to question that. I'm going to do a soft elimination of that. So I got rid of A, and then I can decide between these two. So does it reinforce the claim or does it blur the paragraph's focus? Notice when I narrow it down to two, they tend to be opposites. Now I'm going to go decide yes, yes, and no, no. And here I look at this. This one said it reinforces a claim. I don't see anything about slow and steady in here. So I just want to get rid of that. But then let's make sure this one is correct. So it blurs the focus by introducing a new idea is not clearly explained. Yeah, what does this all have to do with tortoise and a hare, right? It's about restaurants and not a race. So it's not about the reason for being slow or the reason for slow food, but it's it's about the origin of this one particular movement, the slow food movement. So we go with C on this one, 25. Okay, the next one the student asked about is 27. And again, just to reinforce what we did here is that we looked at we built context, got to have context, right? I looked at a concluding statement here because remember, this is not a good conclusion to this because from its beginning, the movement had a pose. If it was a good conclusion statement, it ought to transition well into the opening sentence of the next paragraph. And it certainly doesn't do that. That's another way to decide. Sometimes they'll put the sentence in, like right here or right here, at which point we can't use that technique, but a concluding sentence must transition into, or the subsequent paragraph opening must transition from the concluding sentence. And that clearly does not happen here. Alrighty, so let's go to number 27. 27. Okay. All right, here we have grammar. So I want to look at what we got here. Factors. I have no punctuation. Setting aside that one. Comma, comma. Factors such as comma, comma. Factors and no punctuation. All right, so I'm looking for all of my commas here and trying to, I just really want to make sure I'm seeing them. Here I have none. And let's see if there's anyone. Oh, wait a minute. I got one here. Okay, I got a comma here. Let's go back to the beginning of this sentence here, see what's going on with it. A goat. All right, so a goat. Let's just bring the sentence down. Of course, they give us a goat ingests the vegetation, particularly the meadow, in which it grazes. Okay, so in which, this is a subject and a verb here, but this is what we call a relative clause, which modifies the meadow. It tells us what the meadow is. Okay, and then which, along with other environmental factors such as altitude and shapes. I have another relative clause here because I have a subject which shapes. Here's my verb. Okay, notice how which it grazes, right? In which it grazes. It's actually my subject is it grazes, right? In which is a preposition, but this is a pronoun reference to the meadow. So it's just saying the meadow is which, and then it grazes. So this is a relative clause because it is modifying. It's also called an adjective clause here as well. All right, along with other environmental factors such as altitude and weather shapes. Here's my verb. Say which here. Subject which shapes the cheese taste and fashion. So now notice how this comma here is I can't eliminate it, right? I got comma comma. So which shapes gives me a subject and a verb of my clause, right? And so I can't interrupt the subject and verb with a single comma. So I have to have another comma there somewhere. Now we can logically decide where that might be. But I have to have at least another comma in here somewhere so I can get rid of A because I'm doing subject, comma, verb. That doesn't work. Now I look at B and I got a comma, comma. I have comma, comma, and I have one other comma here. Do we want to have a comma here? Factors such as altitude and weather shapes. Okay, so let's get rid of D here because this does give me subject, comma, comma, verb, but which, along with other environmental factors such as altitude and weather shapes. Factors such as altitude. This is giving me an example of factors, isn't it? So here I have something we call a restrictive or non-restrictive element. Okay, restrictive and non restrictive. So if it's restrictive, it means it's essential to the meaning of the sentence, and it doesn't have punctuation. No punctuation. If it's non-restrictive, then it's parenthetical. It's just adding information into it. So generally, when it's parenthetical, we separate it with punctuation because it's not essential to the sentence. So I say, dogs are nice, right? Okay, simple sentence. But that doesn't make a very good point. Dogs I like are nice. Notice how this I like is really defining what this sentence is about, because this is just a general claim. I'm really saying I only like dogs that are nice, whatever my sentence is. Okay, so this is a restrictive element. Dogs I like. It's actually I won't get into the grammar of that, but it's notice I have dogs, subject, are, verb, and then I have a subject and verb here. So we've got a little mini, which is basically it's dogs that I like. So we can see this either as a noun clause or a relative clause, but it's defining the dogs. But it's essential to make sense, so I have no punctuation. So let's see what's going on here. I think I need a pause right there, right? Such as whether and factors. So I can't go straight into my verb right here. So I want to get rid of D. Now, at this point, I have to say, okay, now this is going to be subject, comma, 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 verb, right? Under my remaining two, it's going to give us 3 commas. I have comma 1, and then let's get rid of this. I have comma 2, and then here. So I definitely have a parenthetical break under whether on both of these. The question is, does it come before the such as or after the such as, right? So notice here, this is such as altitude. Now think about it this way, such as parentheses, that would be saying such as shapes. I can't do such as a verb. So this is saying such as these. In other words, what's happening here is that I'm being told what the factors are, right? So I want to make my parenthetical break right there. So I do comma, which, along with other environmental factors, comma, so that gives me 1 break. And then I introduce this comma serves it's actually going comma, 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 if we think about it, because this is at breaking up these 2 parenthetical phrases to join my subject to my verb properly. That's why I have 3 commas. The first comma after which pause, along with other environmental factors, pause, such as altitude and weather. Now, we could argue whether we need a break right here at all, but this doesn't give us that option, right? The only one that does, we know is clearly wrong because it would need a comma here. So sometimes there are alternative ways of looking at these sentences that don't show up in the possible answers, but I have to deal with the comma between either before or after, such as here. So on this one, I just want to go with B, because that gives me a proper set of parenthetical pauses defined by those commas, which, shapes, right? Subject, verb, which, along with environmental factors such as weather, altitude and weather, shapes. Okay, hope that helps. Alrighty, just to rehash what's important here for firm faithfulness 49 and others, use the rules. Rule 1, Rule 2, Rule 3 to do my elimination, and think through my subject and my verb. That's the real key to not making mistakes. This is not an easy question. It really is. You look at this and it seems to break some rules by having 3 commas in there, but actually one of those commas is making 2 parenthetical breaks in B. And so we have a proper interruption between our subject and our verb of this clause. Okay,